phone in, you can.
Just going to share screen. Can you see my screen, Will?
Yeah, it's on there.
Cool. All right. So yeah, with this meetup, we normally do it once a month, and just try and pick topics or things that are interesting or happening at the moment. So we've picked GTM tools for this one, and we're also kind of open to suggestions for ones in the future, or if there's anyone that wants to do a talk, we're open to the ideas of other speakers rather than us talking. We'll do kind of questions and at the end, and if people want to like jump on the panel and ask a question, we'll open that up then. So normally it lasts roughly, we're kind of aiming for about an hour here or so, or 45 minutes plus questions. So a quick bit about ourselves. We're based in Bristol, although a lot of the team are based kind of around Europe and all around the world, and also a lot of our clients are based all around the world. This was from an event we did in Bristol on escape rooms at Christmas. So we're do a lot of kind of Google Analytics and GTM setups, and normally large scale kind of enterprise level ones. And we've been doing this for over 20 years or so, and we're now up to a team of about 14 people or so, so expanding very, very rapidly. Bristol's like the biggest kind of tech hub outside of London, lots of cool things kind of happening there, and a great little place to be. The areas that we focus on are normally the setups, implementation strategy, Google Analytics, GTM, GA4, and then a bit of conversion rate optimization and attribution modeling, and sort of AdWords setups as well, kind of in that list. But it's normally the key thing is they're normally large scale accounts that need safe pair of hands, and normally relatively complex or require like an international rollout and then a robust setup. So here's some of the companies we work with. So banks, e-commerce, and sort of publishing. I don't think we haven't got Rentokil on there. That's probably the largest one we're working on at the moment. Yeah, lots of large scale sites. In terms of the GTM sort of tools, that we sort of recommend. So I kind of started off with just some that are sort of personal favorites for me. I mean, this one here, it's not necessarily one of the more recent tools, but it's quite handy. So this one's Tag Injector. The reason why I put this on this list is Tag Injector allows you to add a GTM account onto your site without a developer adding that code in. So it's really, really good for training sessions. And what you can do is you can get a user to, let's say, preview an empty version of GTM, like version 1, and then create a new GTM account, and then add that new GTM account ID in the injector, and then they can basically try out GTM without actually with no risk, and they're basically just trying it in their own browser. So it's quite a handy little kind of method or technique. I'm kind of curious to know if people have used that technique in their own sort of training session. So feel free to put in the chat if you have. Or the only thing, this particular tool is not a free one. I think it's only like £5 or so. It's not much, but obviously we like free. So what is free though is that DaVinci Tools, which is probably one of the most well-known GTM plugins, that also does the ability to do a GTM injector, and the little kind of sort of on-off sort of feature when you've got GTM preview mode running, but it also has some other features within it as well. So the GTM or DaVinci Tools, and then it might be worth just linking to the video of DaVinci Tools, maybe putting it in the chat window. That one enhances the GTM interface, and it adds a bunch of kind of extra features. The one that I find kind of most useful is the sort of sort custom dimensions and sort attributes, just because it kind of helps with standardizing an account, especially if you've got lots of custom dimensions and number 20 and number 1 are the wrong way around. and also on Data Studio, it has a nice feature for refreshing a Data Studio report every hour rather than every 12 hours, which is a nice little touch. So again, a sort of free tool, some really good. I've only sort of mentioned a couple of the sort of features that it does within it, but it also allows you to kind of turn on and off particular features within their tool, so you can kind of find the ones that are most useful, just to make sure that GTM interface loads quickly. The only thing to note, obviously, DaVinci Tools was sold to Supermetrics, so I'm not sure of how many new features being added on it now, but definitely a worthy mention for the sort of tools list. The other one is GTM Spy. This is not actually a sort of a plugin for Chrome, but it's a really good way of checking out an account before actually getting access. If anyone's used a Spy Foo before, for paid search, this might kind of ring bells. So SpyFu was a way of, sort of seeing what someone is, what keyword someone is buying and how much they're spending on AdWords. The GTM Spy is a little bit like that. It's very good for discovery, and you can basically go and check out someone else's GTM account, see how they built it, possibly sort of spot problems within that account, or if they've got interesting bits of code within there, copy that code or tweak it or edit it, that sort of thing. So it's quite cool. Great idea. The reason it works is because GTM itself is a JavaScript based, and obviously JavaScript can be sort of viewed and kind of uncompiled or unminified, and that allows you to sort of work out what's going on. To give you one example of this one, so this is the GTM Spy kind of interface. So I'll just put maybe this in the chat window as well. There you go. Oops, chat. There we go. So here you'd enter a domain, so or a GTM account ID. So for instance, if I go to our site, and obviously we've got two GTM containers running because we've got GTM server side and the GTM client side. So if I grab our container ID, I'm trying to remember which one it is now. So I'll grab that container ID here, and if I stick that into GTM Spy, it basically sort of shows me what sort of tags, variables, triggers, etc., are being kind of added, or it should if it's going to load. Or it enters a domain on there. So this should, unless like more than 10 people are viewing it and it's not going to work, should load. There you go. So it then says the version of the containers. This one's on 111, so you can obviously see that on here in the number of versions deployed, and you can see like tags, variables, triggers, etc. But the cool thing about GTM Spy is you can then export this. And it gives you a JSON file that then you can import into another account. So I'm going to come back to that JSON file in a moment. The only sort of things to be aware of with this particular tool are, because it's sort of parsing JavaScript, and in essence it's getting this file here, which is obviously compacted and minified, so it has to kind of guess a bit as to what stuff means within here. So very occasionally you'll find, especially with custom HTML tags, the minification goes a bit strange, and it won't let you import that file. So well, that's a kind of a note about that, but otherwise a great sort of free tool. My only kind of sort of wish list, which is not really a tool specific thing, but I wish Google would introduce a kind of, instead of a GTM.JavaScript here, introduce a kind of an XML export, because then you'd have a structured export that you could pass rather than having to pass JavaScript. And kind of, obviously, if Google decide to move stuff around within here or recompile it or whatever else, obviously that GTM Spy would stop working. So but I understand for security reasons, GTM don't want to expose the XML export sort of publicly at the moment. But I have asked them numerous times, and have pretty much been told that it's not going to happen. So the other one I've sort of added on this list was GTM Bot. So again, oops, I'm just going to visit that one. Really interesting idea, which is to, and they've got a little explainer video. I'll just put that on the chat. There you go. And they kind of walk through setting up a brand new GTM account and add a bunch of variables and settings and triggers and stuff within that. So I'm not going to sort of play the whole video here, but it's sort of a great idea of basically a tick box list. Say, okay, I want PDF download tracking, I want scroll tracking, tick, 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 and then it just adds those sort of template tags into a container. Obviously, this is great for new containers. Merging with the existing one is a bit more problematic. And in order to merge, you actually need to standardize a container first before you can use tools like this, which would add these other enhancements. So there's kind of a piece missing from the GTM Bot kind of tool, and also potentially from GTM Spy, which is in both of these examples, they don't produce either GTM Spy doesn't give you a standard output of tags and triggers all named in exactly the way you need them to be, or with GTM Bot it doesn't give you a list that you can merge with your current setup. It just adds new stuff with completely different names and triggers within it. So there are two slight problems with those two tools, which I'm going to explore some possible solutions for later. But I am curious to know if people have either heard of those two tools that I've mentioned, or if they're actively using them. So feel free to kind of mention. Oh, what about a tag mate? Yeah, I didn't add that to this list, but it's definitely a worthy mention. Yeah, I don't think it's free though. So I've tried to include like sort of free tools kind of in here. But yeah, I like the tag mate video is some cool. Does a quick kind of explainer on there. I think, and also these kind of GTM API sort of tools. The aim here is really just to try and standardize lots of setups and just remove that kind of manual time, especially with GA4 migrations and being able to kind of add enhancements quickly and standardized on that scale. The other one I sort of mentioned on this list, which is not strictly a GTM tool, but the is definitely kind of one that I always use regularly, which is the Web Developer Toolbar. And there's two specific features within that I use, which is reset session cookies and also delete domain cookies. When sort of previewing GTM or when using even Google Optimize as well, I'm frequently having to flush cookies. I don't really always want to use incognito mode, and just having to be able to quickly one-click delete session cookies, delete domain cookies, then do another test. That's just saves me a lot of time and makes my life easier. There are some other features it does, for instance, in the form set. Yep.
Sorry, you just need to put your screen back on.
Oh, sorry. Oops. Sorry. So this is the Web Developer Toolbar. So just highlighting the delete session cookies and then delete domain cookies. And then the other bit is the form one, where it just, if you're doing a CRM integration or end-to-end tracking, the form setting is really helpful for just quickly seeing all of the form values. And also if you're injecting a hidden form field like GA client ID or user ID or source medium campaign, etc., it makes it just really easy to see that that injection has worked. So definitely one that you need in your implementation kind of toolbox. Another one, which is probably a bit of an old school one, but sort of a classic favorite, is DataSlayer. And they've got the cheesiest kind of intro video on the Chrome store ever. But it shows your history of GTM changes. So The problem with the sort of tag assistant and just trying to view the data layer is you can't always see, okay, these updates have happened, but what happened on the next page. So this was obviously before the GTM preview tool V2 launched, but I still personally kind of prefer the interface of DataSlayer just for easily traversing through a kind of a message queue of changes. However, I did want to give a mention to David Valino, if I've pronounced that correctly, who has in effect kind of a more enhanced version of that DataSlayer kind of tool, which does support GA4. And I know he spent a lot of time kind of like building that. So I've not used his tool massively at the moment, so I can't really sort of comment too much about it, but I've heard great things. So I thought I'm going to add him on this list. The other one was I've mentioned Simo's GTM tools, and it used to be that the sort of the checkout option or the kind of the tick box of add lots of tags and then merge those with the container was quite useful. Although obviously GTM have now natively introduced that feature, so it's there's no need to use an external tool to kind of use it. However, the tag visualization is still useful, and I still use that part of it, and it's also quite handy because it highlights if there's any variables that are not being referenced. Obviously, you can sort tags and triggers by, or tags especially by the volume of how many tags are used. So, for instance, one tag is referenced 40 times or something like that. You can't do the same thing with variables. So it's actually quite difficult to work out if you have variables that are active in an account but they're not actively being used and thus should be removed. So his tool has an option on there where it allows you to highlight unused sort of variables and then just go off and delete those. Obviously, there's not a huge impact in terms of on the DOM of having unused variables, but anything you can do to clean up an account and make it as lightweight as possible is always a good thing. The other one, which is not strictly a GTM tool, but it can be adapted into one, is Screaming Frog. So I love Screaming Frog. It's so powerful, and the custom extraction feature of it is just super awesome. And we use that to bulk verify both data layer and also find missing GA or GTag or analytics or JavaScript sort of tags across a site or series of sites. We normally run it in a homepage check first. Then we'd run it on a crawl of a deep crawl of the whole site, and then a crawl of a wide list of sites. And we normally adjust the custom extraction setting to look for a series of things, be it data layer values or tag values, and also extract any account IDs settings. So it's really handy for finding inline code that needs to be moved into GTM or just validating that the developers have added stuff sort of correctly. And it's really cheap compared to tools like Observe Point and Hub Scanner, etc. And also it has the ability to import a custom configuration, which is super cool, and you can just schedule it to run every week or every month, outputs sort of to Google Sheets or Excel, and also has kind of can run on a server, and yeah, very cool tool for validation. And then some couple of old classics. So Tag Assistant kind of couldn't really produce a list of GTM tools without putting Tag Assistant on there, even though it's got a big warning saying legacy next to it. It does, however, quickly give you a traffic light of, is it broken red, is it orange, or blue or green. It doesn't always get it right. So if you're doing a complex setup and you've got 2 GTM tags on a site, you get a false positive and a blue warning. And obviously, you sometimes have to uninstall it and reinstall it for it to work properly. And you have to, when installing it, always remember to set it to always validate rather than manually validate. But it does still have value, and it's kind of a simple sort of check. And for GA, for Google kind of tools, it is still helpful and useful. the other one, obviously, to make it the other sort of Google official tool is Tag Assistant. So as Google has sort of shifted away from the standard Tag Assistant, they've introduced the Tag Assistant Companion, which is to allow the GTM preview mode to work cross-domain. And work better with iframes and such. So and when you try and use the GTM preview mode, it'll ask you to, or recommend that you install the Tag Assistant Companion. So again, it's a necessary one if you're using GTM and you need it to work accurately and to validate accurately. So another old classic is the GA Debugger. This would output a console log of a detailed list of things that are happening within a GA or Analytics JavaScript account. Very useful for detailed problem solving or very specific things with like object conflicts or linker.javascript not executing as expected. And also helpful for enhanced e-commerce debugging. So you definitely need it. And there are some other tools that bundle the GA debugger with them. But I kind of add it in this list because it's kind of nice just to turn it on and off as a separate tool. So that's the list that I've sort of created of the sort of standard the most common GTM tools and the ones that we're using actively. And I'm just looking through some of the comments. We haven't used is it DataSlayer Sifter? I'm not aware of that one. So we used to use one for inspecting DOM elements, but you can kind of do that natively within Chrome if you do right-click inspect element and then copy selector. So there's not really a need to use a plugin for that. So I'm curious to know what people think of that list of tools that I've just mentioned, and what your favorite is from that list. So if you want to sort of put it in chat or comments, please do so.
There's another question from Jason that asks if Screaming Frog has any impact on site's performance when running.
Well, it depends how quickly you run it. I mean, it's you can specify the number of threads that are open. So it defaults normally to about, I want to say 5 threads, but you can reduce that, and you can also add throttling. So like wait 2 seconds before each page if needed. I've never had an issue where it's caused a site to slow down. The only time I've ever had issues were more if a site had a loop, like a site search page that just kept looping forever and it ended up going like 20 levels down. Then that's not strictly a problem with Screaming Frog. It's more of a kind of a robot trap sort of problem. That's not ideal. But no, it's not. It's never caused issues. It's no different really to the site speed tools like Pingdom and obviously just Google crawling through the site. So the short answer is no. There's no impact on site speed. But if you're ever concerned about that, you can adjust the settings so it doesn't add throttling or reduce the number of streams to account for that if you're really kind of worried about it. I would say normally you'd want Cloudflare or CDN active ideally, because that will add a kind of barrier and also improve site speed. So if you're not using a CDN, then obviously you might need to be more worried about sort of site speed tools. But there's so many other crawlers that are going to scan through the site that you have no control over. Screaming Frog's just not really, it's not going to have any real impact, not noticeably. Oh, no mention of WASP. Yeah, I forgot WASP. Gosh, old school one. Yeah. I mean that. I would say. Yeah, I've not used WASP recently, but then it did have some features for viewing custom dimensions and content groups in a slightly easier to sort of view way. Yeah, forgot that one. Cool. So I'm just going to jump on to some other sort of suggestions. So obviously we're covering sort of tools here, and sort of now I just want to sort of demo a tool that we've built. so we've built a GTM cleaner. And the reason we built it was I kind of mentioned at with some of the problems with GTM Spy and GTM Bot is that when you need to kind of audit an account, or you need to merge like a template library with an existing GTM setup, the first thing you always need to do is clean it up. And it's just such a mind-numbingly boring sort of task that we thought we've just got to really automate this. So we've created 2 versions of the cleaner. I'll just put Will, if you just put a link to the cleaner in the chat window. The first one is a bit like a GTM Spy, so it will it just digests a GTM configuration and then outputs a clean JSON file. And the second one does the same thing, but does it as a workspace. So it means that you can basically, if you've got an account that's either very large, you've got loads of tags within there, and lots of variables and triggers, and maybe a lot of stuff that is not necessary, then it basically consolidates that. And the option for like deleting tags on there, at the moment we set that as optional, because obviously we don't want to delete stuff. We want to give users the option of deleting, although from past experiences, normally it's fine to delete inactive tags or variables that are not being used because they're sort of dead anyway. So if you go to that tool, we'll probably try a live demo in a second, but I'll just explain what it does. So that would import an existing GTM setup, and if on and then you would want to import and overwrite if you're using the light version of the tool. If you're using the pro version, it will create a workspace where you can see the number of changes, and then you can create version to merge that workspace or delete the workspace to undo changes. So what it does, and this is the pro version, which is creating the workspace, or both versions will delete any unused variables, any unused triggers, and then any unused tags, or any pause tags or tags that don't have triggers attached to them. So it reduces the size of the container, and also really annoyingly, GTM itself, it doesn't add some 5 common variables that you always need. They're just not in the built-in list. So things like true and false, undefined, click path, click host name, and GA settings variable, and then normally like the account ID we would normally recommend in there. So because we're always adding them in all setups, we just need it enabled, those particular ones enabled, as well as the standard like default ones that sort of ship with GTM. So we add these other ones as well to help sort of standardize. The other thing about this is, in order to consolidate in cluster, we need to group that GA settings variable. Quite commonly on old GTM accounts where they were set up before that GA settings variable existed, you've had to go in manually into each event or page view, and you've got to then activate or add that GA settings variable. Really annoying, really time consuming. So this just cleans up all of those event variables in one click, and just points them at that, all of those tags, and points them at that the settings variable, which is just, again, a huge kind of time saver. And then the other thing, we normally add these recommended settings into that Google Analytics settings variable. So things like user ID, allow linker, which really should be on by default anyway, and allowed features and allow personalization. So these are more settings that for compliance you always need to configure, and I think we probably need to add anonymized IP kind of in that list, really, given the things that are happening in Austria. But we basically just make sure those settings are off by default, and then controlled by a cookie management system or CMP thing, and then obviously any page views or events or transactions, etc., have those settings kind of pre-configured. And then and then in terms of how we name stuff, so we normally use a standard naming convention, so DL for data layer, then the variable name, or the word click, and then the actual thing that's being clicked on, or a link click or form, etc. And then if it's a Google Analytics thing, we'd call it UA event or UA page view, or template dash hotjar or something like that. So basically we just standardize the names of those tags. So that the output is a lot kind of more simplified and standardized. And normally when dealing with either OneTrust or CookieBot or some of these cookie management sort of platforms or cookie consent sort of platforms, personally I normally set these to once per page for tags, and then I do an onload event and then an on-click acceptance event. And then the blocking trigger is normally the looking for a data layer allow or a cookie allow. So once per page then means that if there's an onload or an acceptance click, then it doesn't double fire a tag. Obviously, this method won't work on a single page application site, but in terms of a simple way of setting up accounts for compliance, that we find that kind of works the best. So we do give the option of changing this setting, but from past experience, like once per page is normally fine for 90% of sites. And I've pretty much never used the unlimited setting. So so we changed that default. For conversion tags, obviously you want those set to once per page. You definitely don't want those double firing. So we adjust that setting. So in summary, it's free. So the GTM Clean Air and also the Pro version is also free. The Pro version, just the main differences are it creates a workspace, and it also adds folders for you for the 4 different tag types. It just starts this process of cleaning up an account, and then obviously next steps from this would be merging an account and adding other sort of tags within there, just to allow for bulk sort of cleanups and enhancements. We're sort of keen to sort of see what you think of it. So we're just going to sort of try it out now and see what happens with a live demo. And this is going to guarantee you what's going to happen now. But I'm just going to kind of ask the audience for an example of an account that needs to be cleaned up. And what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to ask for a URL or a site, and I'm going to do 2 methods. I'm going to use GTM Spy to download a copy of that container, and I'm going to use our cleanup tool to clean up that container. So you can see how you can use 2 different methods to get to a cleanup. Has anyone got a site that they want us to use as a live demo? If so, please feel to kind of put it in the chat window, and we'll try downloading that account and then cleaning it up. Will, is there anyone any suggestions coming to hand? Otherwise I'll just pick a random site and just try out the method on it.
No, we've got one, metro.de.
Okay, let's give that one a shot. So I'm just going to share screen then. Oops, I'm still sharing. Okay, so what I'll do then, so I'm going to grab so it needs to be a site that's got GTM on it. So obviously can't really just, if you got a different site, unless it's a server-side session cookie on that one. Oh, it's a server-side cookie. Okay, fair enough. Okay, let's try this one then. So let's just reload that. So this one's version 28, according to GTM Spy. Doesn't look like there's a huge amount going on within there, but let's let's try see what happens. So I'm just going to export that account and import it into a empty GTM account. Actually, I'm going to take that and import it into the cleaner. And just the one thing to note, so I'm going to just try, I'm on the light version now. So I'm going to leave I'm just going to put an example account ID on this one, and I'm going to delete pause tags and set it to once per page. Now, very occasionally, the GTM Spy export doesn't pass correctly, so I've got to import it and then export it again. So we'll just see what happens on this example. So I'm going to import this version here. Which is open. So this is the WL version, cleanup workspace. Yeah, it doesn't like it. Okay, so what we'll do instead is just need about 30 seconds. And so what I'm going to do on that one, I'm just going to import that version that was just output. Yeah, okay, GTM Spy didn't pass it correctly. Yeah, so I need a different example. So this one here, again, unfortunately, this is the problem with using so the GTM Spy sort of parser. It doesn't always get certain things right. So have you got a different example? Or can you export a container that you've already built and we can import that directly? Just see why it didn't like. Yeah, so variable parameter must not be empty. Yeah. Well, is there a different an alternative site, or Adrian, did you want to send an export of your actual JSON output from GTM rather than us having to use GTM Spy? I'll just try a different site. Okay. Well, let's do our own site for a start. So I'm going to just pick this example here.
Adrian says that he'll try to export his container.
Okay.
Jan said, how about try something big like gov.uk?
Give it a shot. Oh, it's not using GTM, unfortunately. And it's not a server-side cookie on that one.
Really? That surprises me.
It is using GA, but it looks like they're hard coding it. Which looks really strange. Or it's maybe or not a different tag management system?
Do you have to accept the cookie again? Or?
Not on this one. If I trash session cookies again on this one here.
Yeah, I can't see your screen, by the way.
Oh, sorry. So I was just on gov.uk, just trashing session cookies here and deleting domain cookies. And on here, obviously there's two GA accounts present, but it's not that doesn't appear to be loaded via GTM. It's probably got like Telium or something like that active on here, or it's added directly via a JavaScript file here. Analytics of var. Domain property. Yeah, so there. It looks like they may be using Yeah, this is not. There's not a GTM.JavaScript file that appears to be rendered on here. I can't. It's not really. Or at least it's not picking up the account ID. So I wouldn't. That's probably not a great example unless you can just send me the account ID. Will, did you? Why don't we just export an existing account that needs to be cleaned, and then that's probably a better example. So let me just find an example account. While I'm doing this, why don't we just kind of open it up to kind of questions, and that kind of gives people a time just to find an example as a GTM container. So is there anyone that wants to ask a sort of a question or raise a hand?
Phil, I found there's just I was just looking at old like this old app that I used to use. It's just a screen recording software, and it's called Get Cloud App, and
Right.
And they seem to have some tags on their site, so might be worth a look.
Okay, let's try that one. Okay, so I've just found that site. So Get Cloud App, grabbed the GTM account ID there. I'm going to stick it in GTM Spy and see how reliable GTM Spy is, which doesn't seem to be very good at that.
Best of GTM Spy.
Yeah, I know. I'm going to just download that container. Download. Let's try that again. Let's try that. Look up. Export. download. Okay, I'll tell you what I'll do. Let's find a different example here. Let's pick. There's much in this one. Okay, we've got a different example, so let's just try that. Okay, we'll see what happens here. So I'll just try, someone suggested bristol.gov.uk. All right, so which doesn't have GTM on it. So that's not really going to work. We'll just try, there's another one on here. So we'll just try that, look up container. What I may have to do, as with live demos, it kind of guarantees stuff's going to go wrong. So it's a bit like playing with fire. What I'll probably do is I'll send a recording afterwards of I'll pick some examples which just so you can see them working. It would be good though if you we are kind of after sort of feedback on the tool. Yeah, if you could sort of try it out and sort of clean up those containers. We're only using GTM Spy just because it's a quick way of getting a snapshot example without kind of sharing any, like, you know, personally any sort of client sort of snapshots. We're just going to see. Let's try one more. Export, download.
Adrian, did you manage to export the container that you wanted us to try out? Because the problem here is it's not actually our tool. It's just trying to find a container that we can do this to.
Yeah. I'm just going to try one other method, which is basically importing an account, which basically gets around the pass kind of error. So if I import this one here, import existing, and then I create version and export this version. So this one here, where it's got the standard names that GTM Spy uses here, which is a bit not very clean. Like, so if I then then grab that file, which I've now just exported. So that one is export. And then, right, okay, so what we can do, so I just explained the process I've just done there. So I've just picked this container here. I'm trying to remember where this one came from now. So this was the GXP one, which I think it was from this site. Anyway, what I've done is so by importing that file here and export.
To share screen.
Oh, sorry. Okay, I'll just explain what I've just done. So we've picked an example here from this site. I can't remember which one this was from the examples, but this is 6.8f. I've downloaded this from GTM Spy. I've imported this into a temporary account here. So basically on import container and overwrite, and it's then given me this list of tags here, where you got the standard names that GTM Spy gives you, and then what I've done then is I've exported this one here, which has given me this another file, which is an official GTM export, which is not going to have this parse error, and then I can then import that into the tool, which is what I've just done here with the export. I've enabled these two settings here for delete, pause, and once per page, and then it's given me the output. So this is, you see it just rendered the, or returned the value saying, value cleaned, which is this one. So if I then import that back into this temporary account, using overwrite, and it's basically, you see it's edited 18 of these tags, 18 triggers, 12 variables here, and it's deleted 10 variables that were not being used. And it looks like in this instance, none of the triggers were being used. And I'm just going to reload this page because DaVinci Tools is making things look a little bit different. And you can see that it has renamed those tags. So it's for anything that is a UA page, UA event, UA page view, or a link click, or an Ajax event or element visibility. So that's now more named as to what it should be. And the same with the triggers. So if it is an element visibility, in this case, that's been kind of marked on there, or if it's an event trigger, that's marked, or a link click, etc. And then on the variables, we've got this standard GA settings variable that present within here, and then we've got the some constant sort of values and a URL sort of value, and then the true and undefined kind of present in there. So it is working as expected on that example. We're hitting kind of issues with parse errors on GTM Spy on that example. If I just show you one other instance, so I'm going to just go to the Pro version. So you'll see on here at the top here it says switch to Pro version, and you'll notice the settings here are slightly different. Now, just one thing to note on the Pro version, if it is a very large GTM an email that has lots of GTM accounts, it can take a few moments to load. So that the light version is not doing any loading in the background, it's just importing and exporting. So when I do click this, it may just take a few moments to get a list of all of the accounts. If it does say kind of reload error, just reload the page, and it's going to just then pull a download of GTM accounts so that it gives you an option as to which one you want to kind of clean and tidy up. And once you select the account and then container, it will then go off and create a workspace with that cleaned up container. So in this instance here, where I just picked this example, if I revert back to how that was before, so either set as latest here, or I can just import the uncleaned version. Which was it this one? And it's got stuck rethinking. Right, oops. Okay, so what's happened now? So I'm on the Pro version, and you can tell that because it says back to light at the top here. I've authenticated, and it's given me a list of GTM accounts. I've selected the account that I was working on, which was called temp in this case. I'm just going to pick an example GA account ID, and I'm going to delete pause tags and set this to once per page. And there's now obviously 2 extra settings or options on there. One says recommended folder structure, and the other is subscribe to newsletter. So I'm just now going to click on create workspace. And that's going to do exactly the same as the light tool, but with those 2 extra sort of settings. It's now going to add folders and also create a workspace, because now obviously it's authenticated, it's got API access, so you don't need to manually import an overwrite. So if I now jump back to that container here and go back to workspaces, and you now see there's one called cleanup container with 35 changes in it. And there's now a folder sort of present. If it doesn't recognize the tag, so for instance, if it's custom HTML or it's not, or kind of a community template, it may not necessarily put it into a folder. But the folders we normally use are functional, necessary, performance, and targeting. And then we also personally use like marked for deletion and marked to review. If it's still sort of spooling through the accounts, it may just finish kind of updating in a second and just sort of see if it moves them into folder once it's done. It's still kind of working at the moment, so it's probably just processing the folder part of it as we speak. So if I just reload that container, just see if the folder part is done. Oh, there you go. It still is working through it at the moment, so it's halfway through. So in a moment, it'll finish adding those folders. So obviously, it says it's made 54 changes here, and in a moment that will just sort of finish kind of going. Let's try it once more, see if it's finished. Okay, and we're done. Phew, thank God. Okay, so then just there's a link here which takes you to that workspace. I'm just going to jump straight to it directly.
You've stopped sharing your screen.
Cool. Okay, so that's the link to the workspace. I'm just going to jump to it. So I'm on here where it's got the cleanup workspace. It's made 49 changes here. It's now got that folder sort of present that's populated, so it's just spooling through them. That's why it was empty before. And that's what you've got conversion linker in performance, AdWords conversions. We put them in performance because they are performance related. And then the targeting tags for all pages, remarketing, and a Bing all pages sort of tag. So if you are happy with this workspace here, you could then press submit, create version, and then that will merge with your existing sort of account. Or if you don't want these changes, you could just delete this version here, and that will just remove those pending workspace changes. So it's completely you can kind of sort of it's temporary in terms of the changes that are made here. This is fine in terms of I'm happy with these changes, so I'm just going to create version and roll forward. In the future, our plans are to also introduce a kind of an audit PDF, which gives you a score and gives you the amount of size that has been reduced, the number of changes, and kind of almost like a benchmark of sort of GTM sort of cleanliness. And also, we're probably going to tap into the built with API and use that for identifying tag types that you should have active, that are active on competitors, but maybe not active on your site. So we've got some interesting kind of plans for the tool kind of later, but the merging piece is the first step in order for us to start adding additional sort of features within it. So I'm conscious of time. We've gone over by 8 minutes. And hopefully you got a bit of a sample as to what's happening in a live test there. Apologies if we hit a few kind of issues with GTM Spy. It's unavoidable in a demo. I'll know to pick maybe a different site in future. Did people want to kind of raise a hand or ask a question? So I'm just reading through. Someone put, what do you think about GTM copy and paste Chrome extension? It was useful back in the day, but no longer needed now because you can export individual components from as in individual exports. So it's depreciated. And in the same way that Simo's tool, which did kind of individual merge, is also unfortunately depreciated. Cool, and just running through these other sort of comments. Got one new message. All right, so yeah, what features would Chris asked a good question? Would you like to see added to GTM? So for me, I would say in terms of auto events, then they're missing a geolocation auto event, and also I would like to see a native GTM cookie compliance banner. Obviously, consent mode is one side of the puzzle. There's not a sort of native banner, which would be handy, and also better control over like cookies, so a set cookie function and a read. Although with the sandbox JavaScript, there are some features within there for set cookies, which partly get around those missing native variable sort of features. I think the other bits that I would like to see is more what's missing here, and is there's not a public library of tags and features. So obviously we've picked our own selection here. The key component is it needs kind of peer review. It needs users to vote for their favorite features, and for the people to write comments, thumbs up, etc. So that's a piece I think that's missing. So because it'd be great for, we'd love to promote our tool on a public library and also add feedback and comments to other users that have created sort of tools, but Google hasn't got a way of doing that at the moment. They do have that on like Data Studio. There's a public library of like templates and such, but not within GTM and GTM API as it currently stands, which would be good for them to add. Cool. Okay. Well, I don't see any other sort of questions in here. So but we will try and reply to individual kind of questions or comments. And for these sites we just tried to kind of review earlier, if you send an email through to hello at with the export of your container, what we can do is rather than use GTM Spy, we'll just use the raw export. So I'm just going to share the screen on the last bit. So so for the people that provided those examples, you send the raw export of your container to hello at, and then we'll send you the cleaned output. If you've got any feedback or on the tool, please kind of send it through. Or if there's any features that you want us to add to the tool, we would love to hear about them. Our intentions are to always make, at the moment, both the Lite and the Pro version are going to be free, at least for the next 6 months. And so we're kind of interested really in how people use it, what they use it for, is it helpful, or is there features we need to add into it? Also, if you've got topics you want us to talk about in the future, please reach out and let us know, and we can sort of plan out those other sort of topics. Cool. All right. Thanks everyone. Hopefully it's been helpful. Sorry for a few teething issues as we sort of work through there. Not necessarily entirely down to ourselves on that one, but we probably should pick different examples. But at least it sort of keeps everyone on their toes. All right. So thanks everyone.